Bismillah Rahmanir Rahim. As you know, my topic is to discuss India's Ukraine policy and what challenges it brings for India. So if we see the trends in India's foreign policy, one of the most prominent trend is the non-alignment foreign policy. India, since its inception, India pretends to follow a non-alignment policy, and they try to achieve maximum interest through making or safeguarding their position of neutrality. However, this Ukraine crisis creates a tricky and challenging situation for India. And during the course of my comments, we will try to understand that how and why the situation is tricky. So, if we briefly see that what efforts India committed to create a balance in its Ukraine's policy. So, first of all,
Could you please stop for a while?
sorry, these are the problems of cyber world and how when we try to connect on through internet. Anyways, immediate reaction of India was to restrain and stay neutral and focus on ensuring safety of its nationals in Ukraine. So that was the immediate interest of India, and they try to portray themselves as neutral. And they, but later on, right after few hours of the war started, Indian Prime Minister Modi called Mr. Putin and urged him to cease violence and emphasize on diplomacy and dialogue. And since then, Modi has called thrice, has made a call to Putin thrice. Meanwhile, Modi also called the Ukrainian president and expressed his concern over the loss of innocent lives, but did not criticize Russia in any case. Since then, Modi has called Ukrainian president twice at least. And then India chose to remain abstained during UN resolutions on the same issue or on Ukraine crisis. We have to understand, and this is an important fact to be shared, that according to CIPRI, from 2017 to 2021, Russia's share of Indian defense imports is 46%, and India received to 28% of Russian defense exports. So this is how India and Russia are tied together in mutually beneficial relationship when it comes to defense cooperation. However, we should remember that India and Russia are strategic partners just like US and India. India and Russia support multipolar balance of power in Eurasia, and they don't want, both of them don't want over more empowerment of NATO in any case. Indian military development, technological development in military, or basically that relies on Russian support and Russian technology. For example, both states signed a deal of US dollars 5.43 billion for the S-400 air defense system. Defense cooperation between both countries is fundamental for India to counter China or India's ambitions to present itself as a counterweight to China in front of the West. Under Modi, India is evolving as illiberal and ethno-nationalist democracy. So therefore, liberal democracy as per Western standards is not a problem of India in any case. Europe can be a distant friend, but Russia is an immediate friend and neighbor for India. And if we see, later on I will discuss it as well, Indian strategic thinking, a close neighbor friend is more important for them than a distant friend. So India has, as I told you earlier, but India, interestingly, not only with Russia, but India has very mutually beneficial and cordial relationship with Ukraine as well. And Ukraine provides technological support to India. For example, Indian Navy warships are dependent on Ukrainian gas turbines. India also provided 90 tons of humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. Therefore, and moreover, 24% of international students studying in Ukraine are Indian. So 24% international students in Ukraine are Indian, and recently India, with the help of Ukrainian government, India evacuated 2,250 Indians from Ukraine. Then we have to understand that spike in energy prices is harmful for Indian economy, and that is one of the most important tangible or intangible challenge and concern of India. Then again, if we see the history, during the Crimean crisis in 2014, India termed Russian stance as the legitimate interest of Russia. So in 2014, somehow India managed to balance or remain or to follow a balanced foreign policy. And then when we see China, as the earlier speaker also said, China is more supportive of Russia in Ukraine crisis than India, and it also termed Russian security concerns as legitimate concerns. India manages, however, to remain more neutral than China in Ukraine crisis. However, there would be a strategic consequence for India if Russia and China would come closer as the result of Ukraine crisis, because both of them, they don't want NATO's expansion in any case, and NATO coming closer to their borders. According to Jay Shankar, Indian minister, he stated it in the Indian parliament that Indian position on Ukraine crisis is based on 6 principles: end of violence, dialogue, diplomacy, respect for territorial integrity, and status quo of global order. However, being a student of strategic studies, it is really amusing for me to see that what India suggests to Russia and Ukraine, India doesn't follow the same 6 principles in South Asia as well. And all of its South Asian policy is based on questioning and violating the sovereignty of the South Asian states. India further supports bilateral negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. This is very interesting that whenever India emphasized on negotiations between the two actors in the conflict, India never talked about third-party intervention. So we need to understand that Indian strategic thought it focuses a lot on strategic proximity. And India has strategic proximity, whether it is tangible or intangible, with Russia. And then India has a history of Russia supporting India on several challenging times of its history. So now there are few points to ponder for India when they try to maintain the neutrality. What if Russia diverts its arms exports to the Ukraine war and making it harder for India to procure Russian equipments? This is really very important concerns of Indian strategists as well, that if the Ukraine war is not ceased and it continues, then how India would deal with its military and defense requirements, because then Russia may focus on fueling or utilizing its defense resources in Ukraine war. If Russian military supplies and technology transfers to India were halted without matching supplies from the West, then what about the Indian dream of balancing China? And most probably that dream would become a nightmare if if there would be a halt in Russian military and defense supplies to India. Then international sanctions on Russia would hurt Indian interests, as they will affect their bilateral cooperation. For example, exports of S-400 missiles, leaning of Akola class submarines, manufacturing of 8203 rifles, and exports of BrahMos missile. So what about all these ongoing defense deals between the both countries? However, we cannot, and being Pakistani, we should not ignore the fact that between 2017 to 2021, the USA is the third largest defense supplier to India with 12% of market share. So how to balance in this situation when India has its economic progress, its regional strategic position, and its military development on state, how India would really balance and what would be the options for India? And can India balance and what they should think? So I foresee following challenges for India in this above mentioned discussed scenario. Number one challenge is the diversification of its defense dependence. And as all of us know, the diversification needs policies, diversification needs time, and diversification needs to look for new partners, which is not something which India can resolve immediately. So India's defense, massive defense dependence on Russia has created problem. And in terms of security, we security analysts, we believe that any country should not depend on one country to meet its requirements. The dependence should always be diversified. Then what if India would be pushed towards Western camp? Because when we see the regional interest, except containment of China and challenging the rise of China, there is no such common interest exists between the West and India. So which would convince Indian public and policymakers and strategic designs that Western camp is an affordable option for them. What if they would be under this scenario of mutually beneficial cooperation between Russia and India? What if India would be pushed towards Russian camp? That would also make India not a conducive, reliable partner of the West to counter China and to contain Chinese rise. So how India would manage that? And when we see the statements of US officials and some gestures of Russian government, they both are, the West and Russia both are not happy with the Indian neutrality and India's neutral stance, as it is not serving their interests. Then how India would manage to seek benefits from both camps? And right now, the way Ukraine crisis is evolving, it appears to be difficult for India, that India would be able, while following the same old policy of neutrality, India would be able to fetch maximum benefits from both of the camps. How India would satisfy its defense development, its technological development, when and if the military modernization would be slowed down because of the existing crisis. As we know, Indian technology or technological advancement is already questionable, and there is a big question mark on the credibility of Indian military technology. So how India would cope with the another challenge or crisis of slowing down and slow pace of that military modernization.